That's such an important message. Before I get back to Wesley, Sinead, one more question. Which brands, and when we get back to the sort of top-down model you talked about at the beginning, which brands have been most receptive to this message of inclusivity?
I'm fortunate to partner with several different brands from a global landscape, but I think what we have begun to see is a number of brands, whether that's Tommy Hilfiger and his adaptive collection, which was celebrated here in London at the British Fashion Awards last night, whether that's an individual focus, looking at what brands like Gucci and Ralph Lauren are doing. But I think what we are seeing more and more is a ask from the disabled community to not just then be perceived as customers, but to also not just be perceived as customers of an adaptive line. Some of the work that I'm trying to do is also thinking about pipeline. So whilst we can plan and build opportunities for business developments in the now, where are we cultivating disabled design talent for the future? What obligations or expectations are we placing on educational institutions? Once again, as Jeffrey was talking to earlier, the best design colleges in the world, how are they creating opportunities for disabled designers to be present, whether those disabilities are visible and invisible? What are the opportunities for non-profit organizations, for example, like the Ford Foundation, to be able to collaborate and to be able to provide equitable and accessible opportunities that are rooted in justice in those spaces? I think the brands that are doing well are trying, but I have real questions about what does systemic sustainable change in this industry look like? Because again, if we are designing fashion capsule collections that in some ways are othering by design because we are saying that these are just for disabled people, what is the opportunity for those to grow, to expand? And is there a way in which that they can be done with disabled people for the long term? I think as what was discussed earlier, when we think about designing with disabled people, we need to think about this from a universal approach. So to give you a very good example, when we are thinking about designing an adaptive wear, often we think about something that's medicalized, something that's very specific for a disabled person, usually a physically disabled person. But my definition of accessibility is far broader, and again, is rooted in design innovation. So for anybody who identifies as a woman or chooses to wear a dress, we will all have had an experience where once in our lives we have probably had to sleep in that dress. And that's because a dress was designed by a man in an era where those identifying as female or those who chose to wear dresses had husbands, partners, or domestic help in order to be able to get out of it, because a dress is largely designed with a long zip at the back that has a very small fixture that requires quite a lot of grip. All people who wear dresses would benefit from an adaptive dress, meaning let's remove the zip from the back. Let's either put it in the front, let's not have zips at all. What are the 3D printing methodologies that are now available to us? What technology can be provided to actually make clothes functional for everyone? Because much of the designs that we still wear were created in an era that we no longer socially exist within. So let's encourage disability innovation as a way in which to rethink design for value for all. And I think there has never been more important a time than to do it now. If we look at the pandemic, if we look at the impact on the disabled community, here in the UK, 6 out of every 10 deaths were disabled people. If we look at the CDC now saying that those with long COVID will now be part of the disabled community. The disabled community has never been bigger, more expansive, more intersectional. So let's leverage that expertise, that creativity, and design not just a fashion system, but a global system that is equitable, just, and creative, and accessible for all.